Welcome to the podcast to Philippe, where we like to take a deep dive, into all sorts of fascinating topics. And today, we're headed to Paris. There's a lot of buzz about these new uh, MF19 metro trains. Supposed to be really modern, sleek design,
Yeah.
update the whole passenger experience. But there's this one detail that's got some people scratching their heads: the charging ports.
Oh.
Yeah, they put in USB-A ports. Can you believe that?
Mm.
So now we're into 2025. You're riding this cutting-edge train, but good luck charging your phone.
Yeah.
Everybody's moved on to USB-C. It's like they've stepped back in time. I mean, it's kind of funny, but it also makes you wonder, what are the implications of this?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
kind of technological time warp.
It certainly raises questions about how we keep up with technology, especially when you're talking about infrastructure projects. These things are built to last for decades.
Exactly. So let's break this down for our listeners. These MF19 trains, they sound pretty impressive on paper. What's all the hype about?
Well, they've actually been in development for quite a while. Initial designs go back to 2016, 2017. Construction start in 2019. So they're bringing a lot of improvements to the Paris metro, better lighting, redesigned spaces. And for the first time, they're going to have onboard charging.
Okay, so being able to charge your phone on the go, that's a big deal for a lot of people. But then there's this whole USB-A thing. By the time these trains are actually running in late 2025, USB-C is going to be the standard everywhere,
Right.
especially in Europe, that EU mandate that went into effect.
Mhm.
At the end of 2024, I have to admit, the first time I read about this, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Did somebody miss the memo?
Well, you have to remember that the trains were designed, and the initial construction phases happened when USB-C wasn't as common.
No.
But it does make you wonder about foresight.
Yeah.
These trains are supposed to be in service for decades. Did nobody think about the fact that technology might change?
It's like textbook case of what happens
Mm.
when you have long-term infrastructure planning,
Yeah.
butting heads with,
Yeah.
the speed of technological change.
Exactly. And it really highlights a fundamental challenge for cities and transportation systems. How do you build for the future when the future of technology is a moving target?
That's the million-dollar question. It's like trying to hit a moving target.
Absolutely. And the consequences can be pretty significant. Think about it. Are Parisians going to be carrying around USB-A adapters
Yeah.
in 2040?
Yes, a good point.
And what does that say about Paris and its image as a technologically advanced city? These are some of the questions we're going to be digging into in this deep dive.
Right. We're going to unpack all of that, so stay with us.
Yeah, it really is a fascinating case study. This whole thing has implications that go beyond just a little bit of inconvenience for riders.
Right.
It could actually affect how Paris is perceived globally.
That's an interesting point. In today's world, cities are competing to be seen as innovative, technologically advanced. So how do you think this USB-A situation plays into that?
Well, just imagine you're a tech company looking to invest in Europe. You're going to be looking for signs that a city is forward-thinking, right, embraces the future. And something like this, even if it seems like a small detail, could send the wrong signal.
Yeah, it's like a little red flag.
Exactly. It might suggest that Paris is falling behind.
And when cities are competing for talent and investment, that can have a real impact.
Right. And it's not just about the economics. There are potential environmental consequences, too.
Oh, how so?
Well, think about it. People are going to need to buy adapters, maybe even new cables, just to use the charging ports on these trains.
That's
With all that extra consumption, it goes against the whole idea of sustainability.
Right. So we've got economic implications, environmental concerns. What about the people who actually ride the metro, the Parisians themselves? How much of a pain is this going to be for them?
It's hard to say for sure. Some people might not even care. Maybe they have an older device, or they just don't need to charge their phone on the go. But for others, it could be a real hassle, especially if they rely on their phone for work or navigation.
Yeah, it's almost like they're being sent back in time, technologically speaking. So are there any solutions? Can they retrofit these trains with USB-C ports?
Retrofitting an entire fleet of trains, that's a massive undertaking.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Logistically and financially, it's probably not realistic, at least not for the trains that are already being built.
Okay.
But the Parisian Transportation Authority has said that future orders of the MF19 might have USB-C ports.
So future commuters might be in luck. But what about the millions of people who are going to be riding these first trains? These things are going to be around for decades.
Exactly. And that's why I think we need to shift the conversation away from just pointing out the problem and start focusing on creative solutions.
Right.
This could be an opportunity for Paris to show that they can adapt, that they're committed to innovation.
I like that. So let's brainstorm for a minute. What are some possible workarounds?
Well, they could partner with tech companies to create portable charging stations and put those throughout the metro system.
Interesting.
Or maybe they could offer discounted USB-C adapters to riders.
Yeah, those are good ideas. Instead of this being a symbol of technological stagnation, it could become a springboard for something new.
Right. It's about demonstrating a willingness to evolve, to show that Paris is shaping the future of urban technology.
That's a much more positive spin on things. So let's zoom out for a second. What are the bigger lessons here? What should our listeners take away from this whole USB-A saga?
I think it highlights the importance of considering technology as part of infrastructure planning from the very beginning.
So instead of playing catch up with technology, we need to be anticipating it,
Yeah.
designing our systems with that in mind.
Exactly. It's like building a house. You wouldn't install electrical wiring that couldn't handle modern appliances, right?
Makes sense.
Same principle applies to our cities.
Great analogy. So what concrete steps can cities take to avoid ending up in a similar situation?
Well, first, they need to foster a culture of innovation and collaboration.
So break down those silos.
Exactly. Work together with tech companies, with research institutions.
Right.
Second, they need to be more flexible in their approach to planning.
So instead of these rigid long-term plans, they need to be more agile.
Precisely. And finally, they need to prioritize citizen engagement.
That's a good point. Get the people who are actually using these systems involved.
Exactly.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We started with these outdated USB-A ports. We looked at the potential consequences. We brainstormed some solutions. And we talked about the big picture, technology and infrastructure planning.
It's been a really interesting conversation. It's amazing how a small detail like this can lead to such a wide-ranging discussion.
Well, that's what we do here at the Podcast of Philippe.
Mm-hmm.
We take these little details and we unravel the bigger stories they tell.
And hopefully we've given our listeners some new things to think about.
I think so. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Parisian Metro's technological time warp.
It's been a pleasure.
So we've been talking about this whole USB-A situation in the Paris Metro and how it really shows the challenges of trying to future-proof our cities. I think what's interesting to me is this idea that technology isn't just about gadgets. It's like it's woven into the fabric of our urban spaces.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And it's something that we often forget. We think about infrastructure as these fixed things, concrete, steel. But it's constantly interacting with technology. And that relationship is becoming more and more complex.
We've talked about trains and charging ports, but what other parts of our cities might be vulnerable to these kinds of technological time warps?
Right.
What should we be paying attention to?
Well, think about traffic management systems, for example. A lot of cities are still using outdated sensors and control systems. And as we move towards autonomous vehicles, those systems are going to need a serious upgrade.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about public Wi-Fi networks? It seems like those become obsolete almost as soon as they're built.
Absolutely. The demand for bandwidth is just going to keep growing. As we use more and more data-intensive applications, cities need to be thinking about not just providing Wi-Fi, but providing really robust, future-proof networks.
Right. It's like we need a whole new way of thinking about urban planning. We can't just plan for the next 5 or 10 years. We have to be looking decades ahead.
Exactly. And that requires a shift in perspective, a willingness to embrace uncertainty and adapt to change.
So it's less about having all the answers right now
Yeah.
and more about creating systems that can evolve.
Yeah. And that's where I think citizen engagement is so important.
Right.
We need to be tapping into the collective intelligence of our communities, having open conversations, encouraging experimentation.
So it's about co-creating the future of our cities, not just dictating it from the top down. I think we've had a really thought-provoking conversation today. We started with this USB-A issue in the Paris Metro. We talked about the bigger implications. And I think we've come up with some interesting ideas for how we can build cities that are more adaptable, more future-proof.
It's been great discussing this with you. It's amazing how these seemingly small details can reveal so much about the forces that are shaping our world.
Well said. And that's what we're all about here at Le Podcast de Philippe. We take a closer look at the everyday things, the things that people often overlook, and we try to uncover the hidden stories they tell. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful.
It's been a pleasure.
And before we go, don't forget to subscribe to Le Podcast de Philippe on YouTube. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support means a lot to us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning,
Yeah.
and keep diving deep.